Hello everyone and welcome back to Nerd Doc. Moon Knight is almost over with only one more episode left after this one, and the craziness is here, literally. This video explains episode 5 of the Disney Plus Marvel series. There will be spoilers in this breakdown of the episode. If you do not wish to be spoiled, you can find some of our other Moon Knight coverage linked below, including breakdowns of the other 4 episodes, and an explanation of who is Moon Knight and all of his personalities. If you're here looking for the song that plays during the end credits of Moon Knight Episode 5, it's Saat by Sabah. But just before that plays, you hear the beginning of Mas Alla del Sol by Manuel Bonilla. Apologies if I mispronounce any of that. We can't play the songs here because of YouTube copyright, but you can find Spotify and YouTube links to both songs in the description below. If you have any questions about Moon Knight or any of the characters or events in the 5th episode, leave a comment and we'll try to answer them as best we can, or just comment and let us know what you think is going to happen in the last episode. Like the penultimate episode of WandaVision, episode 5 of Moon Knight tackles Marc's origin story as Moon Knight and the origin of Stephen Grant. The episode begins with a quick flash of Marc's mother in a scene in which he's about to be abused as a child, which is what causes mental disorder, but we'll get to that in a moment. This is followed by a quick flash of the scene with Taweret at the end of episode 4, before we find Marc still in Arthur Harrow's office at the mental facility. Marc's face is all beat up as if he just got into a fight with the staff at the facility. That doesn't actually happen, but in a way it's showing that Marc is beating himself up. More on that in a moment. After a brief conversation with Dr. Harrow, we're back with Marc and Steven standing in front of Taweret. We covered the Egyptian goddess in our breakdown of episode 4, which you can find below, but she is mainly known as the goddess of maternity and childbirth. Her purpose in the series is more akin to her role in Egyptian mythology to cleanse and purify the dead so they can safely pass into the afterlife. Taweret makes mention of Jawat, the Egyptian underworld, which is a sign Marc is actually dead and this isn't happening in his fractured mind. It should also be noted that Taweret mentioned the ancestral plane, which is a nod to Black Panther. When T'Challa consumes the heart-shaped herb, he sees the ancestral plane. In the comics, Wakandan and Egyptian gods are sometimes one and the same, which makes this a possible hint toward a future connection between Moon Knight and Black Panther in the MCU. Marc and Steven find themselves on a ship as Taweret is ferrying them into the afterlife. You can see the scales of justice on the deck of the ship. These are the same scales that Arthur Harrow has tattooed on his arm that he uses to judge people. Your heart is weighed against the feather of Maat, which represents truth and justice. In Egyptian mythology, if your heart is heavier than the feather, Ammit devours your soul. But in the show, this has changed to being thrown overboard and turned into stone. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you can move on to the field of reeds, which is a similar ideology to heaven. When Arthur tried to judge Stephen earlier in the series, he said his heart was in chaos and couldn't be judged. The same thing happens here. Taweret tells Marc and Stephen that they need to look through their memories in order to balance their heart so it can be properly weighed. However, if they take too long, they will automatically be pulled down into the sands and turned to stone. Marc's heart is unbalanced because it's incomplete due to his fractured mind. He must dig through his memories and accept his childhood trauma in order to balance his heart. Marc and Steven head back into the mental facility, which is just a way for them to visualize the underworld because it's not something that the human mind can easily comprehend. Taweret also mentions that it's been a while since anyone has passed through there. This is because most people in modern society do not worship the Egyptian gods like they did in ancient times. That lack of faith has not only caused the gods to retreat to another realm, but it also means people no longer pass through the underworld like Marc and Steven are currently doing. This is kind of like an astral projection, except their physical body is actually dead. Marc and Steven start looking into the rooms of the mental facility, which are filled with memories of their life. They get to a room with a number of dead bodies, which represents all the people Marc has killed during his time as Moon Knight. New York is mentioned here, which is actually where Marc lives in the comics. This was changed to London for the series because too many MCU characters already live in New York. When a child appears, Steven follows him into another room that serves as Marc's childhood. It's here that we learn Marc had a brother, Randall. As children, the two went out venturing and Randall ended up dying because he drowned when a cave flooded. This is different from the comics in which Randall actually lives to see his brother become Moon Knight. In fact, Randall eventually becomes Shadow Knight thinking he's also an avatar of Khonshu and ends up with similar powers to Moon Knight. It doesn't seem as though that will happen in the MCU, but with the multiverse and the general ability of Egyptian gods to bring people back to life, you never know. As we go through Marc's childhood, he wants to keep certain things from Steven, which is partially what's keeping his heart in a chaotic state. We learn that Marc's mother blamed him for the death of his brother, and it caused her to lose her mind a bit as well. She even beat and abused Marc. This caused his mind to break, and he created the personality of Steven in order to protect himself from the trauma. The Indiana Jones-like explorer from the show Marc was watching in the mental facility in the last episode was named Dr. Grant, and he wasn't afraid of anything. Marc used that idea to create his second personality, even going as far as to name him Steven Grant. Whenever he couldn't handle his mother's abuse, Steven would take over to protect Marc. Marc moves out when he gets a little older, and Steven didn't need to take over as much. When it eventually flashes back to Marc and Dr. Harrow back at the mental facility, Steven has now taken over, and the wounds from earlier are no longer visible on his face. Steven refuses to believe that his mother is dead, but eventually accepts this when Harrow pretends to call his mother on the phone. This act caused Steven to face the reality of his mother's death, no longer hiding in denial. This also shows that the mental facility is all part of the Egyptian underworld, as Steven and Marc visualize this in order to deal with their trauma. 2 months ago, their mother died, and Marc tried to go to the Shiva for her. A Shiva is the first 7 days following a Jewish funeral. Marc couldn't go inside the house, and Steven ended up taking over once again to protect Marc from the memories of his childhood trauma. This is where his mind started to fracture even more, and he could no longer keep the two personalities separate as they started to bleed into one another. This is what we've seen throughout the series. Marc blames himself for his brother's death. This, coupled with the abuse from his mother and his father's unwillingness to properly take care of the situation, is what really caused Marc's mind to fracture and for his heart to be unbalanced. We see Marc's raid on the dig site where Layla's father died. It does not show Marc's partner Bushman, but he is mentioned again. Everyone at the dig site is dead, killed by Bushman, and Marc is shown crawling into Khonshu's temple. Marc was about to end his own life when Khonshu speaks to him and convinces Marc to become his avatar. While technically Khonshu did save Marc's life, this is more about mental manipulation, with Khonshu taking advantage of Marc and getting a new avatar in the process. This is slightly different from the comics, where Marc is actually dead and Khonshu revives him. All of these memories nearly balances their heart, but time is up. Servants of the dead, made to look like people Marc has killed, board the ship and fight Marc in an effort to drag him overboard to his permanent death. Steven helps Marc fight them off, but ends up going overboard himself. Steven is turned into stone, but with Steven gone, Marc's heart becomes balanced and he ends up in the field of reeds as the episode comes to an end. The plan from here is for Marc to return to the world of the living. He won't have the ability to heal or any of his other Moon Knight powers, but he'll be alive again. That's all he needs, because once he frees Khonshu, all of his powers will return and he can stop Harrow and Amit. Souls of the people Harrow and Amit judge can already be seen falling into the underworld, meaning Harrow has likely already unleashed Amit or is about to. Time is running out, as Marc will have to regain his Moon Knight powers and stop Harrow and Amit before it's too late. We don't yet know if we'll see the third personality, Jake, in the final episode, or if we'll even see Steven again. While this episode seems to take Steven out of the picture, it's possible Marc's mind is still somewhat fractured, especially after he eventually comes back to life and reconnects with Khonshu. Plus, there have been multiple hints at the third personality, which would indicate Marc's mind is still fractured. It's also possible that Mr. Knight could become Steven's new persona, with that version of Moon Knight occasionally appearing at times when Steven would have appeared to help Marc out of a sticky situation. Either way, we'll find out for sure next week. That wraps up this episode. Once again, if you have any questions or would like any additional explanation, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to come back next week for our breakdown of the final episode, as well as all of our Multiverse of Madness coverage also coming next week. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves Moon Knight.